So much, Melissa, and thank you at home who've taken time from your busy day to join us to talk about literacy legislation in Virginia. As Melissa said, my name is Lorraine Hightower. I'm a certified dyslexia advocate and consultant, and I help parents every day work collaboratively with their school systems to ensure that their kids who have dyslexia have the appropriate remediation services, supports, assistive technology that they need, not just to survive school, but to thrive in school. And through that process, I've had the opportunity to have a lot of important conversations with teachers and principals and even school board members and legislators. But I can assure you that now that my son is in high school, over 12 years ago or 10 years ago when he was in first grade, teachers and administrators weren't so comfortable talking about dyslexia. In fact, at that time, it was thought of as the D word, and it was very hard to get our kids the supports, the services, and the accommodations that they needed. And as a mom who was watching her son struggle each and every day to master basic skills like letter sound, correspondence, writing letters, being able to read, and even memorizing math facts as he got older, I was desperate to find a community of like-minded parents who wanted to make a difference. And I was overjoyed to discover and align forces with Decoding Dyslexia Virginia. And I can tell you, it is still one of the thrills of my lifetime to be a part of a legislative effort where we passed the first bill in Virginia, a mandated teacher training bill on dyslexia that changed things, not just for my son, but for all kids, because all of a sudden, teachers, administrators, legislators, and community members started to know what dyslexia was. And so again, we're so appreciative of you joining us tonight, because as we start the 2021 legislative session, Decoding Dyslexia Virginia has a couple of champions and a couple of bills that we want to share with you and talk about how you, even from the comfort of your own home, can help support this important legislation. So the first bill is HB 1865. This is a very important bill for parents who have students with dyslexia or young kids that they may not even know if they have dyslexia. We are grateful to Delegate Karrie Delaney. She has agreed to champion this bill, and this is a intervention bill that aligns with a certain methodology. For many of you who are joining us, you know that the Orton-Gillingham methodology, a certain methodology that is explicit, phonologically based, cumulative, sequential, requiring mastery at every step, is critical when we're trying to teach our youngest students how to read. So Delegate Delaney has put together a bill, as we said, 1865, and this bill does require the appropriate intervention for students in grades K through 3 who have been identified through reading diagnostic tests. Now, this could be a reading SOL. This could be any other type of diagnostic test. These kids have not met the benchmark. And so what we're saying through Delegate Delaney's bill is that if your student has not met the literacy benchmark and they're in grades K through 3, parents are going to be notified of this. School systems are going to know what type, if this is passed, the school systems are going to know what type of intervention would be effective in helping the student learn how to read. And parents will be notified before this intervention begins. So this is something that many of us in Decoding Dyslexia Virginia have been advocating for years. And more importantly, it also is going to help to continue to educate our school teams to let them know what is the appropriate type of intervention that they should be using when they're looking to make a difference in the life of a struggling reader. So we are thrilled that Delegate Delaney knows what it takes to help struggling students learn how to read, that she's put together a bill that includes advanced parent notification, that this bill aligns with the science of reading, requires Orton-Gillingham and structured literacy methodology. For many of us in the Decoding Dyslexia Virginia community, this is something we've been asking for years. So as we talk about the tips tonight, I hope that you can get behind this piece of legislation and help us reach out to legislators to ensure that it does pass. I also want to share that just hours ago, we found out that Delegate Glenn Davis is going to be carrying HB 1947 this year. This is another very exciting statewide bill that could make the difference in the life of kids with any type of disability. So Delegate Davis's bill is a computer coding bill, and basically the purpose of his legislation is that for students who have disabilities and they would like to be on track for an accelerated diploma, they may have challenges meeting the language requirement in school. So his bill allows for computer coding to be considered a language that meets the language requirement, the whole language requirement, or world language requirement, so that these kids can be on track for accelerated diplomas. So we just want to acknowledge and thank Delegate Glenn Davis for championing this piece of legislation. And again, we're going to get into how you at home can get around these two important bills and help ensure that they are supported at each step of the legislative process. I love this picture. I don't even know what year this was taken. I see that we have a whole group of families and kids. And I just want to say that, Decoding Dyslexia Virginia is not just parents. We are a community that has moms and dads and grandparents and tutors and teachers and everybody from all walks of life, where they either know someone who's been dyslexic, they are dyslexic, they've seen the impact of a child who's been dyslexic, and this legislation, resonates for them as well. And they get behind it and they reach out to their community and their legislators and they ask for support. So this was taken in Richmond when we were trying to push through, I think, that very first piece of dyslexia legislation over 5 years ago. And as a community and a grassroots organization, Decoding Dyslexia Virginia has helped pass over 5 bills. So again, this is the power of the parents, as I say, but I do want to acknowledge that Decoding Dyslexia community does include more than just parents, and that all are welcome. So we're thrilled to have you all here tonight. And my first request of all of our attendees is please commit to joining this grassroots movement if dyslexia is important to you and your family. There is no membership fee. We're going to talk about how you can get involved and what you can do. Of course, you can always reach out to the leaders at Decoding Dyslexia Virginia, but commit to help make a difference. It doesn't take a whole lot of time. And by lending your voice to this important issue, you really can play an important role, not just in local change, but systemic statewide change. So Decoding Dyslexia's mission, of course, is to raise awareness around the subject of dyslexia, to advocate for more trained, informed, qualified teachers to work with dyslexic students. We also want to make sure that the appropriate interventions are being used, as we talked about in Delegate Delaney's bill, and also want to make sure that our students have access to effective accommodations to include assistive technology. So it is more important now than ever before. Many of us are seeing our kids struggle in the middle of this medical pandemic as well as an educational pandemic. And it's really hitting home just how important accommodations and services are for students with disabilities. The other great thing about being at home is that it's easier than ever before to get behind these pieces of legislation and make an impactful difference without having to get in the car and drive to Richmond, Virginia. To start, we're going to talk about 5 different key action steps that I think parents have found were helpful in figuring out what role they might play in supporting these important pieces of legislation. And first, I want to suggest to everyone that you write your family story. And this does not need to be a lengthy exercise. You can put a couple of bullet points together, but this is something that you're going to want to be able to share with a legislator, a legislative aide, maybe another parent that you meet as part of this effort. And I put some guidance questions for you here, but when you really think about dyslexia, your child, your family, why you care about this issue, I would encourage you to look at, what are your child's challenges? What have you done to try to address them? Many of us who've joined forces with Decoding Dyslexia Virginia, it's because our kids were missed in the public school system. And many of our parents and grandparents have had to take heroic measures, whether that's tutoring their own kids, pulling their kids out, finding private schools, driving hours to get them there, or, learning themselves how to tutor their own child. So it's important to kind of have your bullet points together on how this affected your family, what you did to try to address it, what has helped your child succeed, or what do you believe would have helped your child succeed if they had had access to appropriate intervention, for example? And why should the legislator care? This is a really important question to give some thought to, and we'll talk about, actually talking to or meeting with the legislator in just a moment. But our legislators are elected officials. They are there to serve our community and us as constituents, and they really do want to make an impactful difference in areas that matter to their community. But many of them, like our school staff and school administrators years ago, don't really know what is dyslexia or why it should be an important issue for them and their office. So you may have to take a few minutes to educate your elected official on what dyslexia is, the most common learning disability out there, that it affects as many as 1 in 5 students, and that unfortunately, even though teachers and staff now know more about what dyslexia is, they've not all been provided with the appropriate training they need as part of their higher education requirement to leave college, show up in our classrooms, and be able to implement this critical intervention. So as we know, as parents, we've seen some of the social and emotional tolls that being a student with dyslexia can have when you're not supported. And our legislators need to know. Our prison systems are filled with dyslexic individuals who did not have access to appropriate intervention or appropriate support. Students with disabilities drop out of high school at a faster rate than those who don't have disabilities. And our students are at higher risk for drugs, alcohol, suicide. It is not just an educational issue. Dyslexia is a societal issue, in my opinion. And once legislators understand that, they really do start to ask you more questions. And can you send me resources? Hey, I never knew that. I thought schools already took care of this. So again, put a couple of bullet points together so that you have your thoughts organized on what you're going to share, and know that your legislator may not know what dyslexia is. So after you've taken step number 1 and you kind of jotted down your family story and why this is important to you, you're going to want to identify who your legislators are. Now, Decoding Dyslexia Virginia has so many wonderful resources on their website. So I encourage you to go to decodingdyslexiavirginia.org. You can click on the Advocate button and you'll find all kinds of resources to include sample letters that you could send a legislator, sample emails, there's even scripts that you can follow. But we definitely want you to identify who is your legislator, your delegate, your senator, and commit to getting in touch with them. And we'll talk about what that looks like in just a minute. But when you use the link that's provided on Decoding Dyslexia Virginia, it will tell you who your legislator is and their office contact information. So there will be a phone or an email, and oftentimes there's a way to request an appointment or request, a meeting with the legislator or that office's legislative aide. You can also use the resource that Decoding Dyslexia Virginia has put together. They have a 1-page document that talks about the mission of Decoding Dyslexia Virginia, what's important, to us as a community and a grassroots movement, and again, why legislators should know about this important issue. The third action step that we encourage you to take, and we realize not everybody is comfortable doing this right out of the gate, is to ask for some type of action from your elected official. Now that can be as simple as, calling the office and saying, I'm a constituent of yours, I live in Loudoun County, Virginia, and I just wanted to call you and ask you to support HB 1865 and HB 1947. That can be all that it takes to get on the agenda of a legislator and have their office want to look into, well, what are these bills? So when you reach out to your legislator, I encourage you to be flexible, to understand that you may not talk to your elected official right out of the gate. There's usually an administrator, an aide, someone who's going to answer the phone. You just want to be polite and courteous and say, I live in Loudoun County. I understand they're my elected official. I'm calling because I would ask them to look into and support these bills, and here's why. So you're going to introduce yourself, your role, and if they give you the time, you can start going into those bullet points about your story. Oftentimes, I know over the years when I've been advocating with Decoding Dyslexia Virginia, somebody will answer the phone and they really don't want to have a long conversation, but I quickly start telling them who I am and that I have a son who has dyslexia, what happened to him in school. Did you know it affects 1 in 5, students? And all of a sudden they're on the phone with me asking me all kinds of questions. So go ahead and, get that information out there. And don't be surprised if they tell you, well, can you just send us some information? We're very busy. The legislators in meetings. That's where go ahead and offer to say, can I send you our one-page document that will tell you a little bit about the pieces of legislation we're hoping your office will support? So don't be put off by someone who's in a hurry to get off the phone. Let them know that you are a constituent, and if you're not a constituent, you're calling to support these bills, and are they aware of them, and would they like information, and where can you send it to? You do want to respect, if you do get a meeting with your legislator, you do want to respect their time and know that they may not be on time. So that's where being flexible comes in. Even if it's a virtual meeting, hang out in the room, wait and see if they show up, even if they're running late. You might not actually get a meeting with your legislator, but you might get a meeting with their legislative aide. And I know when I first started off, advocating and wanting to talk to my senator or my delegate, I was disappointed when I was told, well, they don't have time to meet with you, but we can get you in front of their legislative aide. And what I found over the years is the legislative aide plays a very important role. In fact, the legislative aide is not in a bunch of meetings or subcommittee meetings, and they have the time to listen to you. So a meeting with a legislative aide can be especially impactful because they have the time, they take good notes, and they have the ear of the legislator. So instead of, being disappointed, if you're told you're going to have to talk with the legislative aide, go ahead and have that conversation. If it's the legislator's administrative assistant and they say, I'm the only one who can talk to you today, don't be discouraged. Go ahead and talk to them about why you're calling, the issue of dyslexia, these bills, why they're important to you, and ask, what is your office's position on dyslexia or this type of legislation? Is your office familiar with these two bills? And I guarantee you, you will be surprised by the interest when you start to talk about children and education and the number of kids that are affected. Again, up to 20% of the population by dyslexia. The average person simply doesn't know that this disability is this common, and that with appropriate and effective intervention, that most kids with dyslexia can go on to be successful readers. And we also have on this list, it is important to show gratitude. So I think all of us in the Decoding Dyslexia Virginia community, we are so appreciative when someone wants to spend the time to talk about dyslexia or our kids. But it is important to follow up with an email, a thank you, whether it's for an appointment, a phone call, as we move forward through the legislative session. If the office that you called does vote yes and support these bills as they move throughout the process, it is a really good idea to go back and just shoot a quick email or make another phone call to that office and say, I just want to, call and thank my delegate for supporting HB 1865. I saw that they voted yes. I hope that they will continue to support this legislation as it moves, forward to additional committee meetings. So we talked a little bit about follow-up, and it is, I would say the impact oftentimes is in the follow-up, because a lot of times when these bills start off, there's a lot of bills and they can move, quickly through these committee meetings. But as the attention starts to intensify around certain pieces of legislation, and hopefully that will be our bills that are important to Decoding Dyslexia Virginia, it is really important to follow up and stay in touch with your legislator's office. Oftentimes it's through you that they're going to learn important pieces of information that's going to continue to reinforce for them why they should care about these bills. Or if they have questions, you're going to continue to be a resource that they can reach out to as their constituent who is informed and knowledgeable about these bills. And I can't tell you how many 11 o'clock at night phone calls I would get from Senator Black's office and his legislative aide as he was preparing to go give testimony or go to a subcommittee meeting the next morning at 8, because I had been identified as his constituent who was keeping his office very informed about the bills, what we wanted to see happen, offering to provide any additional information and answer any questions that they might have. So that is such, follow-up is such an important part of this process and helping us to move these bills and get them passed. And number 5 is our advocacy tip here is, make it happen. We are asking everyone who's watching this, and those of you who will watch the replay, please commit to take whatever action you are comfortable with. And as we said, these actions can be as small or as time consuming as you would like for them to be. But at a minimum, we would love for you to identify your legislator. If you don't know how to do that, you can go to Decoding Dyslexia Virginia.org. You can use their tools and links to find your legislator. You can call them or email them on the bills that we know are moving through session and that we want them to support. If you have more time, you can draft a letter that talks about your family story, why this issue is important. Or you can set up a virtual meeting with your legislator or your legislative aide. Now, this year is like none other, and we're not, meeting with legislators in person down in Richmond. So we really don't know what the rules of engagement will be. But if a legislator is hosting, a live meeting on Facebook, or they're opening up their virtual meeting room, we would encourage you to sign up for a spot to talk with them and to continue to reinforce the messaging around these critical pieces of legislation that could make a huge difference for all of the young kids and the older kids, obviously, who are trying to get through their graduation requirements and pursue accelerated diplomas. We would also ask you to continue to follow Decoding Dyslexia Virginia's Facebook page and to share that in whatever form of social media you are comfortable sharing. Decoding Dyslexia Virginia, their leaders do an excellent job of putting out calls to action, or when we need parents to be available to provide personal testimony as part of a subcommittee meeting. As these bills are heard, sometimes the constituents really do, the legislators really do want their constituents to be there to talk about real life examples of what happened with your children in the public school system, or how you had to accommodate some of the deficits of the public school system to push in private tutoring, or how you had to become a tutor. They really do want you to speak to that issue. So if you're willing to do that, let your legislator know. I'm willing to offer testimony for you at a subcommittee meeting or at a larger full committee meeting, and be willing to submit public comment. Sometimes there's an opportunity to submit a written comment, whether it's on social media, in the newspaper, through a website of a legislator. Again, all that you're comfortable doing would be greatly appreciated as we work as a community to push these bills through, because we know the benefit they're all going to have. And I always say, start talking to your friends and neighbors about dyslexia and dyslexia legislation, because you would be surprised how many members of your local community don't even realize the statewide impact that can be trickle down and had in their local community if these bills are passed. So I was kind of known as the dyslexia lady in Loudoun County for a while, and now I'm in great company. But it is important to talk about why this issue is so important, why these bills are important. As I said, when my own son was in school, nobody knew what it was. Here we are over 10 years later, and that's not the challenge anymore. Almost, I would say, most of the school systems know what it is, and now we're really focused on how are we going to address it. But we've come so far because of that first bill, mandated teacher training, so that everybody knows what dyslexia is. So what we're asking for really can have a huge difference for your local community. And we just ask you, commit to one action item, 5 minutes, 10 minutes a day. Just get started. And as we said, you can visit decodingdyslexiavirginia.org for all of the resources you need. They have made it super simple. So you just click on Advocate, and you can click on Legislate, and you can get all of the information that you need, the background information about the bills, what we're hoping you'll say, tools to help you do that. And if that still feels like too much, then you can just find your legislator and make a phone call and send an email. And we would just ask that you do that as these bills move through the process on a regular basis. And this is my absolute favorite quote. This is from Margaret Mead, and I have seen this quote to be true in my own life as I've aligned forces with Decoding Dyslexia Virginia and worked with my local school system. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has. And as we said earlier in the conversation, Decoding Dyslexia Virginia has passed over 5 state bills in Virginia. And we are thrilled at all of the legislators who've joined forces with us, to Delegate Davis, and as we said, Delegate Karrie Delaney. And we're hoping there's going to be others that will continue to rise to the surface and join forces with us. But parents play, in my opinion, one of the key roles in helping to get these bills passed and ensure that this legislation does make it all the way to the governor. I've also included my contact information because if you're watching this and dyslexia is something that you know a little bit about, or you're wondering if your child does have dyslexia, I do offer complimentary discussion sessions to parents who are struggling to figure out what is going on with my child, what are my options, how do I advocate with my public school system. So if that is you and you do feel like you would like to talk further about that, you can contact me at www.lorrainehightower.com, and I'd be more than happy to connect you with the folks at Decoding Dyslexia Virginia, or provide you with whatever resources you might need to get started advocating for your own child. So I believe we are going to have some questions. If I know some of you are joining us